Most people see a vast emptiness in oceans. They seem to divide us, but in fact, they connect us. Since ancient times, oceans carried people, cultures, religions, and goods to the ends of the earth and created new worlds. I'm Sam Willis, a maritime historian. I'm travelling an old sea route in the wake of a great Chinese fleet.
I love the collision between old and new, it's fantastic.
On giant wooden ships, they sailed bound for the western seas, a journey of over 50,000 kilometres. The fleet followed a trade route that has come to be known as the Maritime Silk Road.
It's an amazing discovery.
And laid the groundwork for how we live today. A world shaped and bound together by trade, where people of vastly different cultures, languages, and faiths find common ground in mutual self-interest. My journey starts in China to understand how these ships were built.
That's a uniquely Chinese invention.
And moves onto the world's busiest stretch of water, the Malacca Straits. A dangerous, narrow channel seafarers must navigate, and where pirates still work. Today's world has been unified by trade. Goods are constantly being made, moved, bought and sold. And an interconnected world is linking people in hitherto unimaginable ways. And this is where you really see it happening: China. This country is both a product of and a driver of international trade. But in fact, the roots of globalization are much older than we realize.
You may think that long-distance trade is a new phenomenon, but actually it's not. More than 1,000 years ago, Guangzhou and other port cities were involved in a dynamic international trade.
The country's trading past was brought to light in 2007 by an astonishing discovery that proved China played a major role on an ocean highway running east to west. This 30-metre-long Song Dynasty merchant ship sank off Hailing Island in Guangdong more than 800 years ago, a tragedy that gives me my first glimpse of what is known today as China's ancient maritime Silk Road.
Very, very occasionally, the fabric of the modern world is torn apart, allowing you to peer into history, sometimes centuries into the past. There's the terracotta warriors, the Mary Rose, and this is the best of them all. It's very, very special to be so close to it.
Archaeologists found gold, silver, and, most significantly, 13,000 pieces of China's most successful export of the time, porcelain.
从整个的中国历史时期来看呢，
Sun Jian
在某一
is
个历
part
史间
of a
段是这样的。
69-strong team studying China's most well-preserved trading ship.
Yeah.
Is this cheap porcelain for every person, or is it very expensive porcelain just for the rich?
啊，像你看到的这些陶瓷呢，大部分是普通用的，就是民间用的陶瓷，但是也有一部分呢是比较好的，很有可能是作为某一定特定的人，比如说船主或者搭载的客人自己携带的这个货物。这边就是实验室，他们在
Sun Jian
处理
is
铜
keen
钱
to。show me something else they were very surprised to find.
目前发现了大概有200多枚铜钱，在当地呢也既可以作为这个 钱币这种一般等价物使用，它也可以作为一种这个把它溶解掉，作为金属，就是它本身就是一种货物。铜钱在当时是严禁出口的。
Does that mean that the vessel was engaged in smuggling? Is that what you think?
南海1号除了这些铜钱，我们发现它有很多是跟，底下的这个铁器是在一起出土，就是运出去的。这在当时实际上是一种走私的行为。
Traders were willing to risk their lives smuggling precious metals out of China. These treasures, illicit or not, helped make China an important trading nation. But a new golden age of state-sponsored exploration was to follow. 200 years later, in 1404, an ambitious emperor issued an extraordinary decree. It marks the start of a history that I'm on a mission to discover more about.
600 years ago, Nanjing is the capital of the Ming dynasty. The Emperor Yongle has been on the throne just 2 years when he orders one of his most trusted court officials to undertake a sea voyage like no other.
Grand Eunuch Zheng He was given command of one of the biggest diplomatic maritime missions in world history. But to set off, they needed solid vessels that would carry them on the arduous passage, parts of which still remain today.
One day in 1962, archaeologists digging at this spot near the Yangtze River discovered this. It's the stern post for a rudder, and it's 10 meters long. And when they worked out the proportions for the rudder itself, they found out that it was 42 meters squared, which is absolutely enormous.
The size of the find hinted that the ships were as long as a football pitch and stood as tall as 8 stories. That's almost 4 times the size of those used by Columbus. And when they constructed a ship based on those proportions, it was awe-inspiring.
It's quite difficult to give you an accurate impression of how big this is, but the first thing that struck me was actually a cathedral, and then after that, an aircraft hangar. That's the only way I think you can get a sense of just how unbelievably massive this ship is.
They were called treasure ships because they were built to bring back vast quantities of treasure from distant lands. But even more staggering than the size of the individual ships was the size and variety of the entire fleet. Professor Dun He is an expert on ancient Chinese shipbuilding.
每次出使西洋的船有200多条，人员是27000多人每一次。那么船呢有好多种，宝船、粮船、水船和马船、战船。
The ships were no doubt a breathtaking spectacle for those at the time. A wonder that, perhaps today, we can only imagine by getting close to the giants of modern seafaring.
Now, those treasure ships were enormous, 136 meters long, 55 meters wide, but they're dwarfed by these container ships, which are up to 400 meters long, more than 3 times the size of one of those treasure ships. Nowadays, there are around 5,000 of the largest container ships in the world out of a merchant fleet of 50,000, registered in 150 countries, crewed by over 1 million seafarers. So they're a common sight in today's port cities, but they're still breathtaking.
These container ships are built to carry tons of cargo on long, perilous sea journeys. How did massive wooden ships, built with 15th century technology, survive the open sea? That's what I'm going to find out next, at a town called Fengwei.
We know from our maritime history that beyond a certain size, wooden ships leak very badly in a rough sea. So how did those mighty treasure ships manage to stay afloat on their journeys on the open ocean? Well, luckily for me, there are people in today's China who still build ships the old-fashioned way.
the original craftsman who built the Ming fleet.
制作的每
In
一
his
个
family
部
records,
件的名
passed
称
down
啊、
over
尺寸
generations,
啊、比
his
例啊，
ancient
都一一非常
shipbuilding
详细的
knowledge.
记载啊。
Nowadays, there's more call for model junks than full-sized ones. But Tang Un and his team stick to the same techniques, including one that made the treasure ships seaworthy. Watertight compartments.
刚才我们出资上出来的量出来、算出来的那每一个舱的那个尺寸嘛，中国早期这个湖船这种水密隔舱就是这样形成的。
This is the skeleton of the ship, and you can see the different sections of it. See how it's segmented. Now this keeps it safe, and it means that if there's a puncture, if the ship starts taking on water, it can be contained, and that's a uniquely Chinese invention.
The watertight bulkhead.
就是
They
现
were
在
already being
中国
used
早
in
期会有
China
湖
in
船
the
这种水密
2nd
隔舱就是
century
这样形
AD,
成的。
some 1,300 years before the Great Fleet. But it took Western shipwrights until the late 1700s to adopt the design.
看这个尺寸，它对准它这个中心，每一个这个按这个位置来垫下去。
With models like this, so often you see them when they're complete in display cases, but it's such a treat being able to come and see them as they're put together.
It's fascinating that Chinese trading junks, invented 2 millennia ago, influenced shipbuilding that's still in use today. Allowing cargo-laden vessels to voyage far and wide. But to get a sense of those journeys, there's nothing quite like feeling how one actually steers. Until danger makes me hand over the reins.
That was so close. It makes you feel a bit vulnerable being on such a small wooden boat in and around these monsters. But I love the collision between old and new. It's fantastic.
Sailing in a small junk alongside modern-day shipping giants shows just how far sea trade has progressed. In 1405, the Ming treasure fleet finally set sail on their first expedition. With over 300 junks and some 25,000 men, the sight would have been extraordinary.
Luckily for us, a chronicler of the Ming dynasty called Ma Huan, who later sailed with the fleet, described his departure, and he does so in the most wonderful prose. The Emperor's glorious envoy received the divine commands. Proclaim abroad the silken sounds and go to the barbarous lands.
I've learned how an imperial decree advanced Chinese shipbuilding to a scale and size the world had never seen. Crossing the South China Sea onto Southeast Asia, this fleet would hit one of the world's most dangerous and bloody stretches of water. And that's where I'm headed next. My journey along the ancient maritime Silk Road from China has brought me here, the Straits of Malacca. It's the world's busiest maritime bottleneck, over 800 kilometers long, but in places just 3 kilometers wide. I'm here to understand just why seafarers both 6 centuries ago and today fear this passage.
Over the quickest route for ships travelling from the South China Sea to the Indian Ocean.
On any single day, there could be 500 vessels passing through, their cargoes worth millions of dollars. Major Loi Shing Tong's duty is to protect the gigantic container ships from a very real threat. With over 100 attacks in the past 2 years alone, pirates.
A small sampan's been spotted off the port bow, and what they're doing is accelerating to place themselves in between the sampan and the vessel that they want to protect. They can pose a distinct threat to even these enormous ships because they too also have small crews, and it's incidents like these, hijacking events, which is the real threat here.
This morning, the pirates aren't real. This is an anti-piracy drill.
What do you think would happen if the Navy wasn't here patrolling these waters?
On the streets, when you see a policeman, you tend not to conduct any crimes. Your presence actually sort of provides a deterrence to these potential perpetrators. We have a ship leaving and entering harbour every 2 to 3 minutes. It is extremely important to make sure that no incidents as such happen within the Singapore Straits.
Security on the high seas keeps the cost of shipping down, impacting the price of the goods and services that reach our doorstep. The benefits are tangible if you picture how this place would have looked at the time of the Great Fleet.
This wonderful location, 600 years ago, it wouldn't have been deserted. It would have been full of shipping, local shipping, travelling just up and down the coast, as well as much larger merchant ships travelling on much longer voyages. But the real difference would have been the utter lawlessness of the area. And it takes coming on board a naval vessel like this just to appreciate the value of having a maritime police force.
So, if piracy is a concern here, why does a third of the world's shipping pass through these straits? Simple economics. Going around the Straits of Malacca adds another 3 days to the voyage, and every extra day can cost around $250,000 US. To make a success of trade, you need to take the risk, both 600 years ago and today. Every year, over 50,000 supertankers and cargo vessels crisscross the world's oceanic superhighways. When these pathways start to narrow, things can get treacherous.
This narrow stretch of water behind me is known as the Phillips Channel. It's an absolute maze of tiny islands, hidden sandbars and sunken rocks. It's a nightmare today for even modern sailors, but 600 years ago, it would have been terrifying.
Even today, with all their sophisticated technology, making landfall is still an extremely risky operation. I'm setting off to find out how local pilots navigate these tricky waters to bring cargo ships safely into port. On an average day, Singapore sees over 300 vessels pass through its waters. Every 2 to 3 minutes, a ship will dock here to load, unload, or refuel. But navigating in this crowded channel is serious business. One mistake could run the ship aground, or worse, cause a collision. I'm heading to a Chinese cargo ship arriving from Europe, the Costco America, with Tek Seng, a harbour pilot who will help dock the ship. 1 out of every 5 cargo ships in the world is Chinese registered. This one is carrying hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of food, electronics, and textiles.
What does your job actually entail?
We are the advisor to the captain to bring the ship safely and navigate safely through the Singapore waters to the berth that she is intended to go alongside.
It's not an easy job, is it, when you have to consider the wind, the tide, the size of these ships?
Yes, you're right. We are constantly learning from every ship. Every birding approach is different. There's no one time, or rather one size fits all kind of a birding approach.
Yeah.
And the one I'm boarding is a monster in size, over 3 football fields long and over 5 stories high. With more than 1,000 ships crowding these waters, coming into this port is one of the riskiest maneuvers in modern shipping. And I'm going on board to witness how it's done.
So what's our arriving draft for you?
Yeah, around draft maximum 11.2.
All right, is all the machinery in good working order
Yeah,
now?
all in good condition.
Okay, we have 2 tugs assigned for us. I require your guys to be standby at the forecastle at all times, 2 anchors ready
Okay.
for emergency.
Okay.
Everything's narrowing down. There are more and more ships. This thing weighs over 100,000 tons. This is the exact moment where the maritime trade route meets the land, and it's so important to view it from this perspective, from up on a bridge, because you realise that the sea is a location for history in its own right.
If this megaship is to stand any chance of pulling into port safely, then the Chinese crew and captain will have to heed
probably will
Seng,
let her
an expert
stay on the
pilot
starboard
with
side.
over
Probably
10
on the
years
starboard.
experience of Singapore's busy waters. It's a crucial service mariners couldn't take for granted in ages past.
The most dangerous part of this operation is sometimes, for example, the main engine suddenly cut off and we lost steerage. This is one of the most dangerous situations that we always prepare ourselves for.
A ship that loses power may run aground, and being so close to the port of Singapore and other ships, the consequences could be disastrous.
We're moving so slowly now, barely more than walking pace, but it would still take ages to stop. It's an incredibly delicate operation, and I'm seriously relieved that I'm not in charge of it.
All right, Captain, please inform your guys 30 minutes to make fast the tugboat.
Following a tense navigation into port, 4 tugboats are needed to help maneuver the 110,000-ton vessel to its final berthing site.
We're getting closer. 5 meters. Two meters now. It's amazing how they can make such an enormous thing move so delicately.
Finally, the ship is safely docked. After a month at sea, travelling from Europe, an age-old process begins, unloading the cargo. During the Great Treasure Fleet's time, ships could stay in port for months, buying, selling and resupplying. But today, more than ever, time is money. I'm about to find out how modern ports get goods to our homes seamlessly and fast. America, a 100,000-ton Chinese tanker full of European goods destined for Asian markets has finally berthed in Singapore's port. Over 500 container ports connect China to the rest of the world. Part of a trading corridor that handles over $400 billion worth of goods each year. And the key to it all is speed.
949 containers need to be unloaded, transferred to other vessels or set aside for local distribution, but all within 10 hours.
Singapore is one of the busiest transshipment ports in the world. Its crane operators move over 90,000 shipping containers each day. The process of shifting goods from sea to shore on a scale like this seamlessly is a gargantuan task. There's absolutely no room for error. Success or failure lies in the hands of the man I'm about to meet. Si Junhong is a Port of Singapore crane operator.
How high up are we?
We are at 15 story high.
It certainly feels that. Do you ever know what's inside the containers?
There are foods, clothes, TVs that people are watching this show on.
It's quite satisfying, I think, isn't it, being able to unload an entire ship that's come from thousands of miles away. How many containers can you move in a day?
For my shift, I can move about 330 for the 6 hours.
That's 55 containers in an hour, or almost one every minute.
Woohoo! There we go, over the sea.
Suspended at almost 45 meters above ground, Junhong must maneuver the crane accurately over the ship to lift the 12-meter-long containers.
That's so cool.
Each year, more cargo vessels are built, ports get more congested, and ships get less time to dock. Smart technology is stepping in to lend a hand. Robotic trucks transport containers from the quay to storage without any help from humans, ensuring faster and more accurate deliveries. It's a crucial part of the chain that gets basic goods from the other side of the world into your home, at the speed at which modernity demands.
600 years ago, when the Great Fleet sailed these waters, the success of a major port depended on human muscle power and sweat. A swarm of humanity unloading the sacks and the bales, perhaps even dragging livestock to and from the ships. There would have been a cacophony of human and animal noise, not all of this beeping and electronic hum.
The world seems to have an insatiable appetite for things. Today we can shop with a swipe on our phone, and we expect products to be delivered immediately. This demand sees maritime trade set to double by 2030 to an industry worth nearly $900 billion US. You don't often sit and think of the process, but when ships dock, it causes a bottleneck in this complex logistical puzzle. Singapore is embarking on an ambitious solution, a huge engineering feat, to keep the 21st century maritime trade flowing their way. I've come to see one of a total of 222 10-story high concrete foundations being sunk to create a massive new port.
In 30 years' time, when it's finished, it'll be able to handle 65 million containers a year. That's twice the amount that passed through Singapore in 2014. You can only imagine the impact this is going to have on shipping, travelling between East and West.
It's rewarding seeing firsthand the lengths we go to trade by sea. Braving pirates, policing waterways, and, when the goods hit land, a gigantic logistical effort. And all of this to allow global trade to blossom and transform our world. But I want to know what else happens when seafarers hit foreign shores.
600 years ago, when Zheng He came to these waters, he sailed right on by. The place I'm headed to next was the Singapore of its time, a place that proves that trade doesn't just connect us, it creates new worlds.
For at least 1,000 years, the straits between Indonesia and Malaysia have been one of the world's most important shipping routes, drawing traders from east and west to one of history's greatest trading ports, Malacca. A town founded only a few years before the great Chinese treasure fleet arrived here in 1405. Although trade has since moved on to bigger harbours in Southeast Asia, its lasting effects on culture can still be felt. I'm seeking out traces from the past, when cultures, goods and people met.
Malacca wasn't just a place where trade happened, it owed its very existence to trade. It was set up by a Malay prince trying to manage his relationship with powerful rivals in Java and Siam, modern Thailand. What he wanted to do was to build a port in the centre of the straits where everyone could trade.
Very soon after they founded Malacca, its Hindu and Buddhist rulers converted to Islam. By the end of the 14th century, Muslim merchants had grown so influential that adopting their religion allowed the city to attract more trade and to flourish. Muslims and Hindus from all over Asia lived side by side in Malacca's ethnic kampongs, a Malay word that's passed into English today as compound. And soon there would be Chinese kampongs too.
Admiral Zheng He presented the Sultan of Malacca with imperial Chinese seals of office, a gift from the emperor to ensure that the Chinese had an official presence in the new trading hub. And a recent archaeological discovery revealed that things seem to have gone according to plan. In 2004, beneath this house, construction workers found some shards of porcelain, which turned out to be relics from the Ming dynasty. Experts soon confirmed that it was a major discovery, that this used to be a warehouse used by the Great Treasure Fleet. Now, the Treasure Fleet's chronicler, Ma Huang, wrote, "Whenever the treasure ships of the central country arrived there, they at once erected a line of stockading, like a city wall, within which they constructed warehouses and granaries, and all the money and provisions were stored in them."
At the site of the old warehouses now stands a museum dedicated to the Great Fleet and its commander, Zheng He. It was founded by a passionate history sleuth,
Dr. Tan?
Hi, good morning. How are you?
What have you found here?
So I come and do research based on the historical record. At the bottom, they are using the big weighted granite block. Wherever Zheng He went, you can find the type of well lining using the weighted granite block.
Right.
So I suspect that this must be an old well, ancient well, and it must be the place of Zheng He's Guanchang or warehouse complex. Full of stuff.
At the same time, Dr. Tan found a second well,
Is
a
this it?
smaller
This
one
is
with
the
a special
second
contraption.
well which I told you. Malacca at the time was famous of putting poison in the water. The purpose of hole is you can put the cap with 2 ears, with 2 holes, and put a steel rod to and put inside. Then you can lock it.
Oh, you
And
could
why?
you could lock it.
Lock it.
For a moment, I was baffled there. So they're protecting their water,
Protect the water.
but they're protecting the
Ah.
commanders of the Chinese fleet.
The first VIP using this one.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Zheng He may have once used this well himself. It's a wonderful discovery. In the old wells, Dr. Tan and his researchers found other remnants of the warehouse's past.
In China, the most famous is called blue and white.
Yeah.
And it's still very nice, doesn't fade. But if it's in seawater, the color will be faded.
So because it was in fresh water of the
Fresh
well,
water,
it's
yeah.
remained
Yeah,
that
immense,
clear
yeah.
and that beautiful, and it hasn't faded at all.
Hasn't
It's
faded. It's that
exquisite.
original.
It's a profound experience to visit somewhere that Zheng He visited. This porcelain is just one of 3 major trade goods traded by the Chinese. There would have also been tea and silk, and this whole area was a massive warehouse complex. It would have been crammed to the rafters with goods.
All around Malacca, you can see evidence of foreign traders, creating a multicultural society that has existed here for generations.
You know, I don't think anything really sums up the spirit of Malacca better than this street, where there's a Hindu temple, a Taoist temple, and even a mosque in the same street. And best of all, it's called Harmony Street.
It's the essence of peaceful trade. All are welcome, all follow a set of rules, and all prosper. But a local legend talks of some Chinese who took things a step further.
Now, if you ask most Malaccans if they know the legend of Hung Li Bo, they'll say yes. She was a Chinese princess who'd been sent here to marry the Malaccan Sultan. Now, her father, the emperor, was so worried about her being lonely that he sent with her 500 maidens who stayed, married into the local population, and had children. Now, there's no Chinese record of such a marriage ever having taken place, and many scholars don't believe it's true. But what we do know is that the Chinese did come, they did stay, and they did get married and have children.
It's a charming story that illustrates the mingling of people and culture in this town. But I'm visiting a family who are living proof of this oceanic legacy. I've been exploring the story of the Maritime Silk Road from China through Southeast Asia. And now I'm about to meet that history face to face.
As long ago as the Tang Dynasty, that's 1,400 years ago, the Chinese began voyaging to trade here in Singapore and other Southeast Asian lands. And of course, it wasn't long before some of them went a step further and stayed.
Baba Sam, welcome. Selamat datang. Come.
Alvin, this is amazing. You actually live in a museum.
Yes, I do. This is my house. It is also a museum of everything that is Peranakan here.
Alvin Yap is a Peranakan. Peranakan means locally born in Malay. They're descended from foreign traders and the Malay women who married them. I want to know what it means to be Peranakan and how the trading past lives on in this very special community.
I think what's unique about the Peranakan Chinese culture is that it has emblems of Malay culture, Chinese culture, as well as European culture in it.
So it's a big jumbly mix.
It's a very nice mix of cultures assimilated together. Perhaps let me bring you upstairs and show you more about Peranakan culture.
I'd love that.
While the Peranakans can trace their roots back 5 centuries, it was in the 1800s that they gained the affluence to produce exquisitely decorated goods reflecting their mixed heritage.
These lanterns are what we call surname lanterns. They would have been placed outside the house bearing the surname of the family who lived here. When it came to festivals, when it came to ceremonies, when it came to celebration, Sam, it would have been 100% Chinese.
It's interesting because although there are things here which are very obviously Malay, there are things here which are very obviously European, everything also breathes China.
So what happened is the men came from China, right? They decided to settle down and marry the local woman. Probably they had one condition. When I marry you, you follow my culture. You follow my religion, you follow my family name, you follow my celebrations. But when it came to food, when it came to jewelry, when it came to the clothing and the fashion, you ladies take care. Hence, you see the very nice hybrid between Chinese and Malay families that I searched through
Today,
the
Alvin
newspaper,
is
the
safeguarding
European
his
or the
Peranakan tradition
buckle.
in the
As
manner
time
he
went on,
knows
it became
best.
shorter European embroidery work.
The Chinese Lunar New Year is just around the corner.
Sweet, sweet.
Before the Peranicans can celebrate the festive occasion, they first have to honour their Chinese
Well
ancestors.
done. Used to be much longer.
The Chinese believe that their ancestors are always with them and that it's their descendants' duty to look after their ancestors. And that means cleaning the altar with chopsticks.
You can see all the little grooves. Make sure every piece of dirt is clean, okay? Or else the ancestors will be very, very upset. In the meantime, I'm going to set up the altar.
Okay. At dawn, the new lunar year begins, and so do rituals dating back to the time of the Imperial fleet, 6 centuries ago.
I've got a pink batik shirt on because Alvin has invited me to celebrate the Lunar New Year in traditional fashion. Peranicans are known for long table feasts, known as Tok Panjang. It's a lavish spread and a showcase of culinary pride.
So good.
It's a seed from a tree, and it's supposed to be poisonous if you don't clean it properly.
Poisonous. Good. No chopsticks.
No chopsticks.
Why not?
Because it's the Malay aspect of our culture.
You can see what is this? It's a very Chinese festival.
It's such a privilege to share this table with a family that sets so much store in protecting tradition. And it's a real reminder that trade, it's not just about exchange, it's about creating things, it's about creating cultures. And that's exactly what this is all about. To us, the rise of modern Southeast Asia seems unprecedented, but in reality, it's a 21st century reboot of the world that the Great Fleet sailed through some 600 years ago. A world in which cutting-edge technology was expanding horizons and creating business opportunities. But that trade wasn't just creating profit, it was making history. A history of new and diverse people coming together, creating mutually beneficial and stable relationships. You see, this wasn't the history we know so well of I win, you lose. It was the history of I win, you win. A history that is told through the story of the Great Fleet.
Over nearly 30 years, Admiral Zheng He led his fleet on a total of 7 voyages. To ever more distant lands, to meet ever more diverse peoples. A deep water odyssey that's taking me further west. Next time, to India and beyond.